opportunity to thank ConnectTech for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I want to thank also the sponsors and their support as well, to the speakers that we've seen for the past couple days, the workshops and everything, and to you all for showing up here. So thank you for that, and greatly appreciate you coming to hear me today. So who am I? I'm Todd Libby. I am an accessibility engineer at Webstaurant Store. I like the name because it's a mashup of restaurant and web store for whatever reason. I have over 20 years professional experience on the web with accessibility. I'm originally from Portland, Maine, and I skipped that. Well, I love lobster and lobster rolls, and I can't get enough of it. Now I am living in Phoenix, Arizona, so it's a big change. I don't get as many lobster rolls as I used to, but let's dive in. My talk today is about something that I've written about a lot and something I'm very passionate about, as much as I'm passionate about the lobster and the lobster rolls, and that's accessibility. And this goes back 20 years when I started. It even goes a little further back, and passionate about accessibility and making the case for accessibility. I do a lot of consulting, and it's a lot of work to bring to the table why we need accessibility on the web. A site is not accessible because of many factors, willingly and unwillingly. Accessibility may have been attended to at the end of the project or not in the budget. Maybe they just, the company or the entity doesn't practice it. So someone that can't access the vital information on a site or in an app because it's not accessible, say they have a visual disability, cataracts, glaucoma, maybe they have a form of motor skill disability such as arthritis, multiple sclerosis, or there's an issue that prevents them from obtaining information they want, but that web app or website is inaccessible. Those are just a few examples of what they face daily. I myself, I'll get into it a little bit, I suffer from migraine headaches. I don't know if anybody else does here, but motion and animation can trigger migraine headache, and a lot of it has been parallax scrolling and some of the misuses of parallax scrolling. So that's my little piece of that. So the case for accessibility is this, people as high as the stakeholders, managers, teams, designers, and developers, we need to do better in not only practicing accessibility, but advocating for it as well. If you've ever read the Web A Million report, which I have a little snippet of it up here, you can see where the breakdown is, and until 2021, there hasn't been much in the way of improvement. And as you can see, across the 1 million homepages, 51 plus million distinct accessibility errors were detected. Not too better than last year. While the number of errors decreased, homepage complexity increased. So that says something about where web accessibility is going. So the British Standards Institution wrote about inclusive design in 2005, the design of mainstream products and or services that are accessible to and usable by as many people as reasonably possible without the need for special adaptation or specialized design. Inclusive design is a way of creating digital products that are accessible to a wide range of people, regardless of who they are, disabled or not, where they are, and encapsulates a diverse spectrum of people. Practicing accessibility in your workflows and methodologies ensures people, disabled or not again, that they can access your product, your website, and your brand or brands, and inclusive design and accessibility go hand in hand. So let's look at some examples of accessibility. So color is a big issue still. Your site has a color scheme. It looks great after the designers are done with the mock-ups, or the color scheme the brand uses is great in the design, and everything in the design system. But it fails WCAG requirements of the contrast ratios for whatever reason. That's one example of accessibility that needs to be improved upon. For people that have a visual disability like glaucoma or cataracts, tryptopia, which is the deficiency of blue in one's vision, they cannot make out that particular color, and again, it does not meet WCAG standards. So if your light blue font color on a darker blue background did not meet those requirements or those guidelines set in WCAG, then it would be inaccessible. I have a few examples here of different shades of white, blue, how they stand on that background. The first one being 4.5 to 1, which is the level AA, meets the level AA guideline. And that's contrast minimum 1.4.3 in the WCAG guidelines. And you can, the URL is there. As a side note, I know a lot of people come to me and say, I can't read those guidelines. It's so technical. It's like reading a technical manual. I 100% agree. WCAG 3.0, which we're working on in the W3C, we're introducing plain language, and I have been adamantly begging people in the W3C to please, beginners, people that want to learn about accessibility, that are just starting out, please make the language clear and plain for those people so that I don't, not that I won't answer the question, but hearing that question less would be great. So you have a couple of, you have one, which I actually saw on a website, which is that 2.57 to 1 ratio, which I saw on a website. I was going to throw in a slide that I came across a newsletter sign up that had a yellow background, but it had a white font, and I didn't want to blind anybody here today, so I kept that slide out. So, and there's other cases for accessibility, and I will show you right now. Little short video here. You have a site that does not traverse well, which Homer talked about a little bit today in his talk, or doesn't traverse well at all, when disabled users use assistive technologies, such as screen readers, keyboard, voice recognition software, or the joystick, the mouthpiece, to navigate around the site because they lack the motor skills or dexterity to do so. So I'll just start this and have you watch it. Let's try that again. I'm just going to throw on this captions here because I didn't check the sound. So I like the example here of the broken arm as well as a situational disability. I always suggest that people go one day without a mouse. It is the most difficult thing I have ever done on a computer before. And I believe I have that URL in my slides on the resources page as well. So, or if you need that, I can get that URL to you as well. So an accessible site makes sure there is a way for those users to navigate through the site with no issues. Examples of keyboard navigation, which you just saw, and how people use that assistive technology to get around the site. Other examples, well, that's not what I wanted. Other examples, accordion components. Accordion components need to be accessible via keyboard. If they're, scrollable in that accordion, in that part of the accordion, the user needs to get into that part of the accordion, be able to scroll through it using the up and down keys, or whatever other assistive technology they are using to do that with. It's inaccessible to people that use the keyboard, for navigation if, you can't tab to it. So make sure that the content is accessible by keyboard in those instances. Another instance I ran across in doing an audit lately was an iframe that had a transcript for a video, which I would have made those transcripts probably a downloadable text file of some sort, which is accessible, not a PDF. And that component was not accessible via keyboard. Wasn't accessible using a screen reader either, which makes it extremely difficult for those users. Using alternative text, which is this next slide. Using alternative text to describe the information in a picture for blind users, images that do not have alternative text that describes to a screen reader or a screen reader user what the picture conveys are a barrier to not only blind people, but other people that use screen readers as well. And not only do blind people use screen readers. Users of newer technologies, people that live in metropolitan areas or people that can afford to buy the latest tech, the new iPhones and everything, for example, they have fewer barriers to break through than people that can not afford to buy a new phone, that use a 3G connection, that live in rural areas, that have older tablets. The glare in the sun, you've ever been outside and it's been a sunny day and you're trying to look at what's, you're reading on a screen, and it's difficult because you get the sun glaring down on you. That's also a situational impairment, or some call it a disability, situational disability. You're squinting and shielding to see that content on that screen. Any parents here? Have you had a child on your lap while you're trying to get work done? That's a situational impairment. Somebody's kicking and screaming and you're trying to send off an email. There's a lot more examples, but those are just a few that I wanted to mention today. And now, show of hands, how many of you work at a company that practices accessibility from the start of every project? Okay, 1, 2, okay, 3. I would have loved to see more hands, but that's okay. How many of you work for yourselves and practice accessibility from the start of every project? 1. How many of you that work for somebody else, when you try to practice accessibility at your work, face pushback from stakeholders, other departments? 1, yeah. How many don't practice accessibility at all? Good. That's what I wanted to see, no hands. So how I, when I see, and I will get to these in a minute, some of the things I've heard, when I hear of pushback in a company, that makes me want to do that. Because thinking about, and a good friend of mine put it this way, we got to think of people on the other side of the glass, which is a great way to put it. Wow, that's not it. Here's a couple that I've heard before. Client doesn't have the budget for it. How many of you heard that? Yeah. We'll get to it after launch, which is probably the worst one. Yeah. Here's a couple that, like Dwight, I had my little moment. The people that use our product aren't disabled. How many of you have heard that? Couple, yeah. We don't have disabled users. I wish I had the foresight to know every one of my users on a product that I've been a part of. That makes me a little uptight when I hear we don't have disabled users. So here are some of the things that I have actually said to stakeholders in my time doing consulting. And I start from the top. You'll be saving the company a lot of money when you do this from the start. And that's true. Once you start doing accessibility from the very beginning, bless you, it's smooth sailing from there. When maintenance is needed, it won't take the team as long to maintain the code because of accessibility and clean semantic code. You have great back-end code, you have semantic HTML, it all comes together. And if you're a developer and you've been on those days where it's crunch time and trying to push something out because something has to be made accessible, and you're facing all that stress, you don't have that stress from the very start if you're practicing accessibility from the very start. So your developers will feel less stress, less pressure, less headaches, and less time spent reworking things. You don't want to have to. How many of you do not want to go into work and reinvent the wheel? And then the last one, a lot of people I know that are accessibility advocates that the first thing I say is you don't want to get sued. Well, I save that for the last part. So you're less likely to be sued by an individual or individuals when they come across your product and they cannot access it. Kind of like what I call the Domino's pizza card. If anybody knows about the Domino's pizza situation, which I think we all do, they could have spent $36,000 to fix their site, but yet they dragged it out for years in court and spent millions and millions of dollars. And in the end, they still lost the lawsuit and lost all the appeals. I think they had 3 appeals altogether. So buy-in. How do I get buy-in from stakeholders, clients, colleagues? Once you have stakeholder support, that support trickles down, I found, in an organization to managers, then teams, and then all the way down to the individuals. And again, on the second bullet point, I don't have to read the second or third. Live testing with disabled users is also another way to get buy-in across the board. I've actually videotaped disabled users using products that are inaccessible, brought them the videos to the stakeholders to have them watch, to literally have them sit down and watch as a user cannot access their app or their website. That kind of changes attitudes real fast, I've found. Being accessible is a good way for a company to differentiate itself from other companies. When you make a quality product, then the company buy-in becomes greater in some instances. Teams that push for accessibility usually lead the way in getting buy-in from other departments and executives, and if the product is high quality and makes the company more money, that's when the company is swayed to adopt the practices I have found in my time. Another thing a lot of people have asked me is, how do I do it? I'm facing all this pushback. I said, just do it. Just make the thing you're working on accessible. Take that time to put that care into the code that you're working on. Make that component accessible. Start small, work your way up. So most of the time, it's how the practice of accessibility can make the company money, or the legal consequences that the company can face that sways a stakeholder. And in those instances, when an executive or stakeholder starts learning about accessibility, if they want to invest in that time, they will more than likely start advocating for it. And here's where the advocation comes in. Once you have buy-in from those executives or stakeholders, having a person throughout each department or team focused on accessibility, I found, will get the organization to practice accessibility a lot faster and adopt accessibility practices. You don't have to go you don't have to go follow word for word the WCAG guidelines. A good example of that is gov.uk has their own set of guidelines, which I thought was pretty smart on their part. They follow WCAG guidelines, but not word for word, and it works for them. They put out quality stuff. So throughout each department, have an individual who is the liaison regarding accessibility, someone that can answer questions, work with others to practice the guidelines, make accessible products, help set up a documentation and tooling, and serve as an intermediary between departments. One person in each department, you have a QA person that specializes in accessibility or is an accessibility liaison. You have one in design, development, other places, even marketing would be great. Get those people in a room, talk about things, and it just expands, and you're more than likely going to have accessibility in that organization being practiced. So gauging the point where the product or products are as far as how inclusive and accessible they are is a key priority. This ensures the team or individual that their efforts to make the product better and accessible are happening. What is the current state of the product? What is the current state of the website or mobile application? Getting the general idea of the level of knowledge that teams and people in the company currently have is important going forward. How versed are they in accessibility guidelines and practices? Do they know anything about the web content accessibility guidelines? And just as a sidebar on that, the accessibility community, for the most part, and I want to say most part being 90-95% is very open to questions. If you have questions, more than welcoming and happy, like myself, to answer any questions anybody has. I answer questions on Twitter all the time. How much training do you have and will you need for your people in that department? Maintaining a written record of all accessibility training done to meet the requirements that apply to your organization is a great way to keep data on all the training done within the organization. Recording the training and who and when it was completed. If there is no interorganizational accessibility training that is available to your organization, you can look into different methods of training, like the kind WebAIM, DQ, or TPGI offer. And those are probably your top 3 among, I'd say, the top 10 entities that offer the best training for accessibility. Consistent implementation of the product greatly benefits the organization. It reduces the amount of work, which in turn can reduce the number of the stress levels that teams are under. Design systems should be used, and who here works at a company that has a design system? Okay, a few of you. So design systems should be used not only to ensure branding consistency, but also accessibility, inclusivity, and understanding of code better. Accessible components help for obvious reasons and reduces the time it takes to implement rather than start from nothing and try to reinvent something that has already been done. Getting buy-in from everybody is important. Testing procedures should be implemented so that departments do their jobs well and do them efficiently, especially QA and developers. Documenting guidelines, so know the rules. Documenting guidelines for your organization is as simple as creating a set of accessibility guidelines, kind of like I believe it's gov.uk. You could internally document them in a collaborative software like Notion or on Google Docs. Somewhere that has a collaborative aspect where people can add to the documentation that the organization has. In this landscape of frameworks and libraries, going fast and breaking things and overlooking and undervaluing accessibility, people need to be educated, and that also needs to happen at the team level. The people that do not have voices, those people that are on the other side of the glass that I mentioned, need you to be their voice. It's very easy and it's very accessible, I'll say, to become an advocate. You know, as a freelancer, setting up meetings or training sessions to onboard organization members that you may be working with can be beneficial to all. Holding workshops or webinars is also an option to train colleagues to buy in as well. And I skipped a little ahead here on the slides. So wrapping that part up, getting a team on board because training brings the team together and people know the importance of accessibility and they want to produce a quality product that people can use regardless of disability. Pitching to those who do not or may not know that accessibility means less time spent working on what they work on. Again, less stress, less headaches, can sway a developer very fast from my experience. So how many of you would, you know, if you're facing those crunches on a Friday because something might be inaccessible, how many of you would love to lose those headaches and stress? Yeah. So standards. Finally get to my slide here that I skipped I skipped ahead a little bit. Here's a list of standards that you can look up. So whether you live in the EU, the the UK, Canada, or the United States. Most countries have rules regarding standards for accessibility. Familiarity with those rules and guidelines only ensures compliance on another level. Whether it is the ADA, Section 508, which is government compliance in the US, the ACA, EN 301549, and I don't like the fact that in the resources, if you go to the site that has my slides, in the resources, it's an actual PDF. So PDFs are notoriously inaccessible, so hopefully that one's accessible. Sharing the importance of the guidelines can be crucial to getting departments, executives, and the organization as a whole on board. Test and record cases where a disabled user, again, is trying to use the product, website, or mobile app. How many of you have seen these Braille readers before? A couple of you? Okay. I just saw somebody, for the first time in my career, use one of these in front of me, and it was amazing to watch this person just breeze through like it was me on a keyboard. I couldn't imagine, having to use that. I can barely use a mouse myself some days. It's just amazing some of the tools, the assistive technology they have out there. So again, showing colleagues and executives those tests will bolster your argument or your discussion you have for implementing accessibility. From there, you can get a source outside the organization that specializes in accessibility testing with disabled users, such as Applause or Fable. Those are two companies that use disabled users for testing on web apps, I believe web apps and websites. The organization and people within may turn around and embrace accessibility at the company and in the workflow once you have, people seeing that testing being done. Whether it is internally or on a contract basis with those firms, those are the people that have those lived experiences. And I've actually used those services before for testing purposes. And I highly recommend them if you ever get in that position. They can benefit you, they can benefit your company and team by having them aboard. These folks bring value to the organization and the team. Oh, there we are. I'm right on the ball with the slides today. Get executives and hiring managers on board to bring people on with disabilities, not only to help with accessibility, but teach and advocate for it as well, and for inclusivity within the organization. Accessibility does not end at handoff or when the project is quote unquote finished. As is with the web, accessibility is ever evolving and needs periodic checking when new features are implemented or changes are made to see if accessibility is still practiced and adhered to on the product. Vigilance of the accessibility of the product or products ensures a standard of accessibility. Again, skip forward. Automated testing of the product wherever possible that fits the strategy of the departments when it comes time to release new features or changes is another good thing to do. Automated testing, I've pretty much broken it down to I do 40% automated testing, 60% manual testing when I do accessibility audits. Any barriers that may arise, and they will be addressed, and they can be handled in a manner that expedites the process and rolls out fixes for those barriers that take them down and make the product accessible for those who need it. Performing screen reader analysis before every release to ensure that users of screen readers and other assistive technologies can use the website or mobile app. Annual audits and user testing is always important, whether made internally by a team or a third party that specializes in accessibility and auditing, especially with user testing by disabled users. What does that audit entail? It entails an executive summary for stakeholders that details the need of the product so that it becomes compliant, as well as addressing the current state of affairs. A developer report that details every possible path that can be taken through the website, mobile app, and product that addresses concerns and needs that will be encountered along the way. Accessibility matters. It matters to those who are getting shut out on a daily basis from some form of digital creation they encounter. So I was in a Twitter discussion the other day. I wrote an article that this talk's based on. It's on Smashing Magazine. And Anna Cook, who is absolutely awesome with her tweets, and I'd highly recommend following Anna. To follow up on my article, she recommends constant effort, which I do too. Totally agree with this tweet. So yeah, that is, start asking about accessibility in reviews, make it integrated in your work. Your team will come around when you show them it's possible and easier than they probably think. Now what? Do the work. I have that on my desk at home to remind me on a daily basis as an advocate, as an accessibility advocate, to do the work. Do the work for the people that don't have a voice. Whether it is by design or not, the fact that accessibility is an afterthought in most cases is a critical oversight we all have to correct. Don't be afraid. I just found that GIF this morning. I had to throw that in there. GIF, you choose. Don't be afraid like those dogs. No, I'll go back. Accessibility and accessible sites and apps make the web better. They make everyone feel included no matter what the situation or disability. Inclusion and accessibility remove barriers for disabled people, and accessibility and performance also makes the web accessible for those that aren't equipped with the latest and greatest phones or devices like I mentioned earlier. Getting on board with accessibility is something we all should do. So here we go. Jeffrey Zeldman. How many know of Jeffrey? A couple of you. Given the moniker the Godfather of the web, I've had him on my podcast, and it was a great talk. We talked for, I believe it was about 2.5 hours on a lot of different things. I had to make it into 2 parts. It was that long. But Jeffrey said, Jeffrey has this quote from his website. So he summed it up nicely in this blog post in 2019. Our industry as a whole thinks less and less about accessibility, not that we ever had an A game on the subject, and talks less and less about progressive enhancement, preferring to chase the ephemeral goalposts of over-engineered solutions to non-problems. Let's make accessibility a priority and advocate against the snake oil salesman and things that make the web inaccessible. So how many of you have heard of Accessibility? 1 of you, 2 of you. Three of you. So Accessibility is a company that makes a accessibility overlay, which is basically you click a button and it makes, the claim is it makes your site totally accessible, ADA compliant. Accessibility and one line of JavaScript added into your site makes your site accessible as me buying a new pair of Nikes makes me Michael Jordan. That's how I like to sum that up. The snake oil salesman. Those of us in the advocacy and the accessibility space, it's been a lot of railing against these companies, and there are just more than accessibility out there. Come on. We have a lot of companies out there that are trying to sell companies, and they do, and they make a lot of money off of it. These companies are a small list of companies that sell those overlays. Simply put, they do not work. And in most cases, if not all, they make it harder and more inaccessible. Don't fall for it. I almost did. I will admit it. So here's a tweet that's from last year, okay? And this really, when I read this resonated with me because I have three of my family members who have disabilities. And, you know, when I, read the line, each inaccessible web page tells him you aren't welcome in this world, I instantly saw those looks that I saw on my family members' faces when they couldn't access something on the web. It was that look of, despair. It was that look of, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of having to want to access something and I can't. That feeling of frustration and that look of them just saying, I want to give up. That's why I do what I do. I always say, and it was kind of like Damar's in the back there. What was it you say?
Accessibility is not just a requirement, it is a must.
Right. So I kind of took that and molded it into this. Accessibility is a right, not a privilege. That URL right there, you can buy a shirt, and that the proceeds that don't go to Cotton Bureau, the proceeds that are like $5 or $6, that goes to charity. That goes to accessibility charities. So yes, accessibility is a right, not a privilege. And with that, we got 5. I'm done. Thank you very much. If anybody's got any questions, I think we still got 15 minutes? Yes.
We were talking about automated testing earlier. What tools do you use for that?
We just talked about this at Homer's Talk. Axe, the browser extension. And I'm a Firefox user, but it is for Chrome. Right? The Axe Web Tools by DQ. I use TPGI has the ARC toolkit, ARC toolkit. I use the Wave tool from WebAIM, a host of others. I use the browser dev tools. Firefox, and Damar's, you'll agree, I think Firefox has the best accessibility dev tools out there right now. I think they're still going to have that title for a while. But that like I said before too, you know, I do 40% automated, 60% manual. So what other tools we got? You got
the color contrast checker Chrome's got tools.
Yeah.
Which by far exceeds what Firefox is doing in the next space.
Yes.
So I always check that. Lighthouse uses
Yep.
that under the hood. Tenant accessibility insights, voiceover.
A lot of them. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. If you look for accessibility tools on a search, you're gonna get a lot of hits. Some of them though, I found a Chrome extension that is supposed to be a screen reader, and it caused me anyways a whole list of problems when I tried using it. So. Yep.
Narrator in your Windows machine is something to stay away from. If you're not using a screen reader that specifically targets accessibility, assistive technology work, stay away from it.
Yeah. Good? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Sorry. Where are we at with text with the overlay background behind it, with the image behind that, as far as accessibility?
I don't recommend it. I mean, right here, I did all I could to get that thank you to show up as best as I could. Now, that's a huge font, so I hope people can read it. I put the smaller stuff on the bottom on an almost black background, just because you're going to have contrast issues on a busy background. So I'm glad you asked that, because that will bring me back to captioning for videos. Merrill K. Evans, awesome on captioning and color contrast and a whole list of other stuff as far as captioning goes. Having that dark background, when you have a busy background and you have text on top of that, if there's places where you're getting that color contrast that's meshing together, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to read that that has a visual disability. So it.
They'll scan the page too, and like highlight that kind of stuff too. I don't know what it's called. I know I've got it in a slide. So, yeah, it's I don't know, but you'll scan the page and find those color contrast.
And that works when the background has some sort of transparency to it?
Yeah, it works regardless. It just takes a screenshot of the page and then, yeah, it says it for.
What was that?
Let me look it up.
All right.
I don't remember.
Anybody else? Yes.
How do you make the best lobster roll?
Perfect question. One, you buy Maine lobster. Don't settle for anything less. You get a hot dog roll, you put butter on it, you grill it.
Split top?
Split top's fine. You throw a little mayo on it. If you don't like the mayo, I'd throw a little hot butter on it.
I have a follow-up to that.
Sure.
What is hot butter? Like spicy or like hot? Like
Just hot. Just heat it up. Oh, don't microwave butter. Come on now.
I'm like, what do you put hot butter in?
Don't microwave that. So I don't know if you heard when we were out for dinner last night, somebody asked me, and I think I was talking to Homer, and I had witnessed a man putting ketchup on his lobster rolls. And I wept. I'll put it that way. I wept. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why. To this day, I don't. That was last year.
So I have a follow-up to that.
Sure, shoot.
What if you mix the ketchup with mayo and Old Bay?
No.
I will see myself out.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Old Bay and mayo, yes. No ketchup, please, no ketchup. I beg of you, as a Mainer, no ketchup. Anybody have any other questions, or you do want to get out of here? You guys want to get out of here, don't you? There might be donut. You know what? Go ahead. Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate it.